Audio Jungle.
How to set up WLAN groups and multiple SSIDs. Every UniFi access point supports 8 SSIDs, and you can configure 1 to 4 WLANs per WLAN group. So you may have different WLANs for your guest network, your corporate network, etc. We're going to talk about how do you configure security and firewall policies. We're going to talk about load balancing. What is the value of load balancing and how is it done in the UniFi controller? We're going to talk about user groups. How do you set bandwidth limits? You may have different groups. You want to set different bandwidth limits. For example, for guests, you want to maybe set a limit to how much they can use in terms of bandwidth. You can definitely do that as well. We're going to talk about wireless uplinks. How can you connect one access point to another access point without a cable? And then we're also going to talk about guest Wi-Fi, guest portal, the free guest portal that the UniFi controller offers you. We're going to talk about the hotspot manager and a number of other topics here. So I'm going to hand it over to Pranav now, and we're going to move over to the UniFi controller, and we're going to walk through a lot of these different settings that are offered in the UniFi controller. So also one more thing before that, anytime you want to test out the UniFi controller, there's a demo available online. So if you go to demo.ui.com, so demo.ui.com right here, you can go there, and there's actually our CEO owns a basketball stadium in the United States, the Memphis Grizzlies. So we've set up UniFi in the entire stadium there and uploaded the setup to the controller. So it's called the FedEx Forum. So you can actually see how that is managing right now. You can see there are 118 access points, 7 switches, 1100 clients connected. So anytime you want, even if you don't have a UniFi controller with you, you can always go to demo.ui.com and play around with everything in the controller and see how the controller is. But for now, we're going to go to one of the controllers that's set up in our offices. And Pranav, I can let you talk about it.
All right, so you're looking at the main dashboard of the UniFi controller. So this is where you see all the devices that are adopted, the switches, the gateway. You will see a warning over there as well that says your setup needs attention. That is because I think some of the devices in our lab are disconnected. So that's not something to worry about. All right, so I'm going to start going through the device section. All right, so whatever devices you adopt into the controller will be shown up here. When you hover over them, you'll be having an option to restart or upgrade the devices from here itself. So you won't have to do anything manually. Let's say that you want to restart the devices or make any changes, everything can be done from here. Now, in regards to USG, I had informed you guys that it has 4 ports which you can set up if you want. Okay, so when you go into ports, you have the option to configure the interfaces. So that means any interface or any port can be selected as a LAN, WAN, or like whatever you want to do. Aside the ports, you'll have an option to select each port as whatever you need. That is either a LAN port or a WAN port. Right. Same goes for the switches. Each device can be controlled from the controller itself. You can select whatever PoE that you want. You guys not able to hear me?
Okay, Pranav, maybe I can control the screen. I think that's causing some interference, and then
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Is the audio better now? All right. Cool. Okay. So, like I was saying, so all the devices can be controlled from the controller. You saw about the USG. In regards to the switch, you can make whatever changes you want. Like set your ports or the PoE changes or the profile can be done from the controller itself. Okay, so we can move on to settings because a lot of people were asking about how to configure the controller or walk through the options in the controller. Right. So this is the site view where like Arnav said, you can have multiple sites in the controller. Okay, this is only for controllers that are self-hosted or the ones that are installed on the cloud or the cloud key. The UDM and the UDM Pro does not support multiple sites. So if you're having a controller at one location, that controller will only be usable for that particular location. You cannot use it for other sites. Okay, so over here, you have an option to name the site, set the country, the time zone. The LED status is for the LED status of all the devices that are adopted. You can either enable them or disable them. All right, let's scroll down a bit. All right, so the advanced features are applicable for both wired devices as well as wireless devices. So as you can see, the advanced features will help you set up band steering, minimum RSI, load balancing. Now, load balancing is something which is related to APs. This is not about the USG load balancing, that is a dual WAN failover. So load balancing will help to balance out clients between the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz band. Okay, so there's an option to send alert emails. So basically, anything that happens in the controller, let's say that a client connects or a client disconnects, or if there is a guest user who connects or disconnects or moves to a different AP, or if one of the devices is having issues and it gets disconnected, you can get alerts via emails to your email or as well as push notifications on your phone so that you're aware about what's happening in your network. Okay, the option that you see here, that is wireless uplink. This is something which will let you connect multiple APs wirelessly. So let's say that there is a scenario wherein you can only wire one AP and there's an AP on a different flow which cannot have a cable connection. In this case, you can enable wireless uplink, and once enabled, this will help. The AP will automatically scan the other AP which is not connected via cable. Okay, but for the initial setup, you will need to connect it to cable because the AP has to be adopted in the controller. So once the AP is adopted, you can place it anywhere else which does not have an Ethernet connection, and you will be able to adopt the AP wirelessly. So we have a KB article which provides detailed explanation about how to adopt the AP wirelessly. The next option that we see here is the Syslog server. Now, there are two options. If you have a Syslog server of your own, you can put in your IP address and it will send logs from all the devices that are adopted into the controller or any of the multiple sites to the IP address of the Syslog server that you have specified. Now, if you enable the option, you also have an option to send the syslog server directly to the controller. This is good for scenarios wherein you do not have a syslog server of your own. Or let's say that you're deploying this for a customer who does not have a server or a syslog server setup. You can enable this option. All the logs from the devices will be sent to the controller, which can be viewed later. So this eliminates the need of having a syslog server for obtaining the logs. The next option, that is provider capabilities. This is something which you need to set depending upon your WAN speed or the ISP speed. That is how the data on the dashboard will be calculated. The next comes auto optimized network. This is a good option, but it might work negatively in some scenarios, but it will work very well if you do not have much interference. So basically what this does is, it will also help you change the channels of the APs automatically. If there is interference, it will help you, block multicast or broadcast traffic if the AP is detecting too much interference, or if there are any packets dropped, the controller will automatically enable the option to block multicast and broadcast traffic. So like I said, this can work negatively because if you have a network or some device on your network that relies on broadcast and multicast and the AP is blocking this automatically, that can create problems for you. So it's better to keep it turned off unless you really need it and you're very sure about if it's helping you or not. The next option is device authentication. This is where you set the username and password for SSH login into your devices. So once you set this, you can use this username and password to log into any devices that are adopted into the controller. Right. Let's move to wireless networks. Okay, so this is a screen where you create your SSIDs for the APs. Like Arnav informed you, you can have multiple SSIDs. You can have up to 8 SSIDs. But when you create 8 SSIDs, I would like to tell you that you would not be able to use wireless uplink. So if you want to use wireless uplink, you might want to keep your SSIDs limited to 4, because the other two radios the other radio will be used for uplinking to the other AP, which is wirelessly located. So when you create an SSID, you have an option to create open, that is without security. Now, this is something which can be used if you're using Mac-based authentication. We get a lot of customers who ask us that they do not want to enter a password. They just want devices to get authenticated using the Mac address. So you can use an open SSID with Mac-based authentication that will help you, get your devices connected to the network without using a pre-shared key or the WPA key. So the other options are WEP. It's much outdated, so no one uses that these days. Then there's the WPA Personal and the WPA Enterprise. Now the WPA Enterprise can be used with the USG because the USG itself has a radius server that is built into it. So the USG, the USG4, the UDM, and the UDM Pro, like all the routers that we have a radius server that is built into it. So if you want to set up a connection where devices are authenticated based on a username and password, that can be set up without the need of setting up NPS, or that's a network policy server or Windows server, which is usually used for this authentication. Moving on, like when you create an SSID, you will see that there's a checkbox that says guest policy. Okay, so this is something which can be used if you want to have a hotspot or a portal or a page that requires, voucher authentication or radius-based authentication. Right. So the other options that you see here under advanced block LAN to WLAN multicast and broadcast. This is helpful if you have some devices on LAN that are sending out multicast and broadcast traffic to the APs. When multicast or broadcast traffic is sent out on LAN, it's not much of a problem. But when they are sent over Wi-Fi, okay, that can really slow down your network, because that is multicast or broadcast traffic is something which is sent to all the clients. So that much of airtime will be used by the AP to deliver packets which are not even going to be used by those client devices. So this is a really good feature which will help you, filter out those multicast and broadcast data which is not required. Of course, you can add exceptions. For example, DHCP uses broadcast, so you can add an exception so that broadcast messages to the router or your DHCP server are not filtered or dropped. Next comes the VLAN ID. So when you connect the AP to a switch, okay, so you can trunk the port and you can have multiple VLANs. So let's say that you have a corporate VLAN, which is VLAN 1, and you create a new VLAN, let's say VLAN 10, which is for guest. So when you create an SSID, you can just check the box here and you can put in the VLAN ID, and that will automatically create an SSID that is broadcasting the network on VLAN 10. Okay, next comes the fast roaming. This is an implementation of 802.1R. Once again, this is an option that you might want to enable if you are certain that all of your devices support fast roaming. Okay, so if you have older legacy devices or devices that do not support fast roaming, that will work negatively. It might not work in your favor. The next option is to hide SSID. That is, if you want an SSID not to be broadcast. The next comes WPA mode, which is again self-explanatory. I believe most of you must already be aware. You can either use AES or you can use TKIP or set it to auto. TKIP is not used much these days. Most of the devices rely on AES. Okay, so next comes the user group. You might have seen in some of the slides that we mentioned, you can set up bandwidth limits. So you can create user groups. For each user group, you can set a bandwidth limit. So let's say that you have a 50 Mbps connection on your LAN, and you have created a guest network which you want to limit to 5 Mbps. So you can create a user group. Arnav, can you scroll to user group on the left side of settings? All right. So if you see here, you can create a name, you can limit the bandwidth and limit the upload bandwidth. Okay. So once you have created a user group, you can have multiple user groups. So there's no limit to that. So once you have created the user group, you can go to your wireless network. And once you've created the network, you can just select whichever user group you want. Right. UAPHD is a power save delivery that will help any clients which support power saving mode to go into power save. So basically an AP is, it keeps sending a beacon to wireless devices, which that's how the wireless devices maintain a link with the AP. So if there are any clients which support UAPHD, you can enable that and the clients can go into sleep mode. Once again, this is a client feature. So if you enable it without knowing what clients you have, it can work negatively and can affect other clients as well. Now, schedule is another good feature that we have. So let's say that you have a guest network. You can set up a schedule so that it only broadcasts during a particular time in a day. So right now, if you see the schedules are mostly set to between 8 to 6. So you can accordingly use the sliders and select in between what time do you want the AP to broadcast. So for example, for Monday, the AP will automatically start broadcasting at 9:45 and it will stop broadcasting at 7:45. So this is good for offices or hotels where you do not want any clients to connect after business hours. So the AP will automatically stop broadcasting. Any clients who are connected will automatically be disconnected. Right, combined name. Okay, the rate control. Talking about the rate control, this is common with all the wireless APs. You can select the DTM intervals that you want, and the 2G data rate control. If you have older devices, you can use lower rate control. If you have newer devices, you can use higher rate control. So this is basically something that will help you deal with device compatibility. So the next comes the MAC filter. MAC filter, I'm sure that most of you must be aware. This is something which will help you block or allow MAC addresses. So, for example, if you create a whitelist, only the MAC addresses which have been added into the whitelist will be able to connect. Anything that is not in the whitelist would not be able to connect. And in regards to the blacklist, any MAC addresses which are in the list will be blocked from connecting, and anything that's not in the list will be able to connect. The last option, that is radius MAC authentication, which is what I told you about when using the open network. So if you want to set up a network where the users do not have to enter a pre-shared secret or username password, you can set up a MAC based authentication. Whenever there is a particular user with his device which is already in the system who is connecting, will automatically get authenticated and will connect to the AP. Okay, let's move on to networks. Right, so this is where you create all your networks. That will be your VLAN or your VLAN only networks, or if you want to create a site to site or your L2TP. Okay, Arnav, can you please click on create a network? Okay, so when you select the option to create a network, so you will see here that there are multiple options. So you can either create a network as corporate. A corporate network is something that will not have any restrictions. Then comes the guest network. A guest network will be created with restrictions. None of the guest clients would be able to access any of the corporate VLANs. So you don't have to create any additional rules. The firewall rules will be created automatically as soon as you create a guest network. Under LAN, you see there are three options right now. That is LAN 1, LAN 2, LAN 3. That is because I do not have a second ISP connected. So that's the reason I have an option to set up the third LAN interface on the USG4 instead of using it as a WAN. Okay, now back to the top, you'll see that there's an option for VLAN only. Now, VLAN only is something that you might want to use when you are not using the switch with a USG. So let's say that you have a third party router on which VLANs are created. And let's say that you have a Cisco router which has a trunk of 3 or 4 VLANs. So when you want to pass it to the UniFi switch, you have to create a VLAN only network. Just put in the VLAN ID in the box, and that will automatically add the required VLANs into the VLAN database on the switch. Okay, along with that, you also have to enable the option for Igmp snooping and DHCP guarding, which is DHCP guarding is basically something that will block traffic from other DHCP servers which are not mentioned in the trusted DHCP list. The next is remote user VPN. Right, so remote user VPN will let you create two types of VPNs, that is PPTP and L2TP. Right, so the L2TP is grayed out here because I already have a L2TP server created, so you cannot have multiple L2TP servers. Similarly, you cannot have multiple PPTP servers. So like I said, there are two options, the PPTP server and L2TP server. And the authentication for these clients will be done using either a third-party radius server that you have or the inbuilt radius server that is the USG. Right, let's move on to side-to-side VPN. Right, so these are the options. Like I said, this is something which is created automatically. So let's say that you have 3 sites in the controller. All you have to do is go to a site and select the remote site. So if you click on the remote site, and if there are multiple sites, you can select any site that you want, which has a USG. And once you click on save, the VPN link will be established automatically without any additional settings needed. So that's all you have to do. So let's say that you have 2 sites, the other site, you select it, you click on save, and after a minute, your site-to-site link will be up. The other option is manual IPsec. This can be used with third-party devices or USGs that are not adopted into the same controller. That is, if they are on a different site. So in case of you're aware of the options, these are basically the parameters that you need to be set when setting up a site-to-site VPN. The next is Openvpn. Once again, Openvpn can be used either with USGs or in scenarios where USG is behind a NAT. That is, it does not have a public IP and the other USG has a public IP. In such scenarios, IPsec won't work, or you might need additional settings which might not be possible on the pure router. So in this case, you can use Openvpn, but the speed with Openvpn will be reduced. It might be like around 20 to 30 Mbps on a USG and around 100 Mbps on a USG4. The reason being that Openvpn traffic is not offloaded, but IPsec, that is for auto IPsec and manual IPsec, is offloaded, so you should be able to get much better speeds. All right, can you move back to corporate VLAN? The corporate network.
Yeah, just a quick thing. I want to talk about the VPN. I think right now, a lot of people are working from home and a lot of people are working remotely. So it's becoming increasingly important for companies to have VPNs. And I think companies are realizing how essential VPNs are. So definitely, I think the 2 important things to look at right now is the remote user VPN and the site-to-site VPN. And we also have, if you Google about it, we have some really good help articles online as well, which explain how those work. So basically, remote access VPN is one that allows users to establish a secure network and let them connect to their office's LAN network. So by doing this, the users can access the resources from that secure network as if they were sitting and working in the office. And that's a little bit different. Just want to the difference between that and the site-to-site VPN. The site-to-site VPN is actually used if you want to convert an entire new site into your office's network. So while remote access VPN connects individual devices like your laptops and your desktops and your phones to your office LAN, the site-to-site VPNs are actually used to extend your entire company's network across different locations. So if a company is setting up multiple offices, the site-to-site VPN option is a great option to have all your offices connected on the same LAN network. So just want to clarify the difference here a bit, since a lot of people right now are asking questions about VPN and a lot of people are using VPNs right now. Yeah, okay, Pranav, where should I move on to?
All right, let's go to corporate, the corporate network. Right, so when you create a network, you have multiple options here. So when the initial network does not have a VLAN option, so by default the USG or the UDM will the default network will be on VLAN 1. But any additional networks that you create, you have an option to set a VLAN ID. So whenever you connect a UniFi switch or a third-party switch, you can create trunks so that these VLANs are passed on to the switches. The next option is to set the gateway, the subnet, and the Igmp snooping, most of which are self-explanatory. In DHCP mode, there is an option to enable DHCP server of the USG, which is inbuilt. Or if you have a third-party DHCP server, let's say that you have a Windows server which is providing DHCP, you can enable DHCP relay, and the USG will automatically create the internal configuration on the switches and the USG itself, which is required for the clients to obtain DHCP. The DHCP name server is the DNS address. Then we have the leash time and the gateway IP, which again are self-explanatory. Now you'll see there is an option called DHCP UniFi controller. Okay, this is a very useful option if you're going to deploy multiple devices, and particularly at a site which has a USG. So when you set the IP address of UniFi controller in that box, so let's say that you have a cloud key or a controller that is running on a PC, all you have to do is just put in the IP address. Any devices that you connect to the network thereon will automatically get adopted or automatically get discovered in the UniFi controller without having to run setinform manually. The next comes DHCP guarding, which again, like I said, it will block any DHCP servers that are not in the network or that you don't want to use. The next is UPnP, like a basic home router. We have added a function for UPnP so that port forwards are created automatically. So whenever a device requests for certain ports to be open, the UPnP function will automatically create those forwarding rules on the USG. Then there are advanced DHCP options. So there are plenty of options. So I wouldn't be talking about that much. But basically, DHCP options can be used for a variety of purposes. Most of the customers that we get use it for VoIP. So let's say that you have a VoIP server or a TFTP server which is located or which is used for network boot. You can specify these options here, and those settings will automatically be applied to the inbuilt DHCP server. So there is no CLI based config or anything that is needed to do this. All you have to do is select any of the boxes from the list, put in any details that you need, and it will automatically be applied to the DHCP server. So the custom DHCP options is used for the advanced DHCP option that is specified above it. Next comes the IPv6 network. We don't have IPv6 here, but in case if there are any ISPs that are providing IPv6, that is something which you can use from here. You can just select the IPv6 gateway or subnet. That is if you're having a static DHCP v6. If not, you can just use DHCP v6 on your WAN, and there's a checkbox for DHCP v6 in between over there, which you can select for automatic IPv6 configuration. Arnav, can you cancel this? Go back to the network list screen. All right. If you look for management LAN 1, can you edit it? Go to actions and click on edit for management LAN 1. All right. Let's scroll down. Okay, so this is how the IPv6 network is set up. So currently I'm having a static IPv6 in my lab. So that's the reason that I have enabled static IPv6. The DHCP v6 is something which will help me to provide IPv6 to all the clients that are connecting on my LAN, that is the VLAN 1. Okay, so next comes the routing and firewall. Okay, so there, if you see, there are 4 sections over here. The first section is static routes. You can either create a route based on your next hop, or you can create an interface route. Okay, so there are 2 options, nothing more to it. Next comes the firewall. Right, so if you look here, there are 3 groups for WAN, there are 3 for LAN and 3 for guest. So basically WAN and rules are applied for any traffic that is going from the internet towards your LAN devices. So you can create those rules over here. WAN out would be any traffic that is going from your LAN devices towards the internet. WAN local would be traffic that is going from the internet to your USG. That is, let's say that you want GUI access or you want SSH access. You can create those rules under WAN local. The next comes LAN in. This is something which can be used for blocking inter-VLAN traffic. So let's say that you have 2 corporate VLANs and you don't want traffic to reach the other VLAN, you can create rules here. So LAN out and LAN local, like I said, LAN out would be traffic that is going from the LAN towards the USG. LAN local is something which you can use in guest networks. So let's say that you do not want the clients to be able to access the USG or any services that are running on the USG except DNS and DHCP, you can create those rules here. Similarly, you can do the same for guest in. Like I said, the guests are automatically blocked, so there's no need to create the additional rules. So if you see here, there are drop rules already created, that is 3005 to 3007, which will automatically block any of the guest clients from contacting the other VLANs or other networks that are created. Right, okay, over here, this is how you create a firewall rule. Okay, so you have an option of creating a rule before the predefined rules or after the predefined rules. So rules basically work on an indexing system. Any rules that are created first are executed first. The ones that come later are executed in the last. The options are to drop packets, reject packets, or accept packets. You can select the IPv4 protocol, or you can select the protocol manually from by name or by selecting a protocol number. Next comes the logging. Logging is something which will help you to understand if the rules are being actioned or not, or what's happening with the rules. So any rules that are being logged would be sent to the Syslog server. So like I explained previously, under the site settings, if you have a Syslog server or if you have enabled the option to send the logs to the controller, all these logs will be a file will be created in the controller, which will be having logs for all the firewall rules. The next is the states. Like I said about packet states, the new, established, invalid, and related are different packet states, because all our devices have a stateful firewall. That's how the packets are filtered. And the other options, that is the source and the destination. So you can create multiple address groups or network groups, or specify single IP addresses from which you want to block traffic, or that is the destination which you want to block traffic. Right. So port forwarding is something very basic. We've been seeing this from, like, even the simple home routers like D-Link have this option. So it will just help you forward external ports to your internal ports. So all you have to do is create a new port forward rule, specify the IP address, select the source port and the destination port, and save the settings. So once the settings are saved, it will automatically create a rule that can, help you use the port forward. The next is Geoip filtering. This is something which is in beta, but it works. So let's say that you have deployed the USG in a location, and that particular facility does not want traffic coming in from other countries. So you can just add those countries here. The list for Geoip is populated. It's populated every 24 hours. So once it's updated, any IPs belonging to that country will automatically block. So you have an option of blocking traffic to that country, that is outgoing, or traffic coming in from that country, that is incoming. So if you do not want traffic to come from some country, you can just add it in the list, and this will automatically disable any traffic coming from those IP addresses. Right. The next is threat management. Right, so threat management is basically IPS and IDS. If you read the warnings above, this is something which will disable offloading, and it will also reduce your throughput. So in the USG and the USG4, the throughput is reduced to a greater extent, but on the newer devices that are UDM and the UDM Pro, they both can handle traffic at up to 800 Mbps with IPS or IDS enabled. So basically, these functions will help you block spyware or malware on your computers, or any devices that are trying to access a Tor or any other websites will be blocked using this option. So we have a KB about this. I'll be sharing it later once I'm done with the controller, so that you guys can go through it. The next is DPI. So this is one of the oldest features. The DPI basically inspects all the packets that goes through the USG, and based on an inbuilt list of signature, it categorizes all the websites that you have into different categories. So Arnav, can you go to the dashboard? Okay, so if you see here, it will show you a list of all the data that has been used. Can you click on the UTM? In the client list or the ER6P. All right, scroll down. Okay, can you go to deep packet inspection? So I don't see anything for this, but if there is any client that is visiting websites, the data will get populated over here. So you can also view it under statistics. That is the second option on the left, the one above map. Okay, so this is a view of your entire network, like whatever is happening on the network, you will be able to see like what websites are being visited or what's the resources that are used and the amount of data that is being used for those particular applications. I would like to add, this will only work for websites that are built into the DPI signatures. So we have most of the websites, but there might be a lot of websites which are not in the DPI signatures. So those will get categorized as others. But the most of the common websites that are used on a daily basis have been added to the DPI signatures. Right, let's go back to settings. All right, can you click on Dpr restrictions? Okay, so this is where you create a restriction group. Can you click on add restriction? Okay, so once you select a group, you can select what what is the category that you want to block. Let's say that you want to block streaming media or any particular categories like P2P, that is for torrents. You can do this. And once again, you have the option of logging traffic to your syslog. So you can use these rules. You can use the logging option to log to your syslog. So once you click on save, okay, so you have created a group. You need to add, click the add option under it. All right, click save. Okay, so this creates the restrictions. Once the restrictions are created, you can use the restriction assignment. Now, the DPR restriction can be assigned to any networks that you have created. So if you have multiple VLANs, you can assign it to any VLANs. So let's say that you don't want the guest users to access any streaming media like YouTube. You can create a restriction for YouTube or streaming media and assign it to your guest network. So anyone connecting to the guest network would not be able to use YouTube or any streaming media websites. Right, the next is guest control. Okay, so once guest portal is enabled, you have four options. You can either just have a portal with no authentication at all. The user will just get a screen that is your guest login page. They'll click on continue and they'll be able to use the portal. The other one is simple password, where and once directed to the portal, they'll be asked for a password. Next is the hotspot, which can be used for radius or voucher-based authentication or even Google and Facebook-based authentications. Okay, can we select hotspot and scroll down? Okay, so you have two options. You can either have your own portal or you can select any of the options from your user Angular or the legacy portal for creating your guest captive portal page. So the one that I've created here, I've enabled two options. I have the option to either use a voucher or for customers who do not have a voucher, they can use radius based login, that is using a username and password. So what we just clicked at was a mobile preview. That is how the the layout would be visible on mobile devices, and the desktop preview would be something for desktops or laptops. So if you scroll down, the hotspot has options for vouchers. That is, you can create a voucher using the hotspot manager. Then there is payment based authentication. So the hotspot manager is something which will help you create the vouchers. Right? Can you click on the second option, the hotspot manager? Okay, so any users who have been authenticated will show up here along with the vouchers. Currently, we have no users in our office right now, so I would not be able to show you how the layout is. Can you go to the last option? Okay, so this is operators. Now, operators, are people who would be looking into guest portal. So let's say that you have set up the controller, you are the super admin, and you want to hand over the portal thing to someone who you do not want to give access to the whole controller. So you can just create an operator login, and you can give them the operator URL, that is a hotspot manager URL. So once they log in, once they open the page, they would be able to log into this portal and create vouchers for any customers without being able to access the controller. So any operators that are created here will only be able to access the hotspot portal page. They would not be able to access the whole controller itself. So apart from vouchers, like you see here, we have radius-based logins. We have Facebook API authentication. We have Google Plus and WeChat as well. So these are all API based. So you will need to sign up for those APIs if you want to use them for authentication. Right now, I do not have any of those APIs, so I will not be able to show how that works. Next comes the voucher customization. This is something which you need to do on your own if you're familiar with HTML coding. So the file is present on the controller. That is the index.html. So once you enable this, it will give you the permission to edit that file and design your voucher the way you want. So let's say that you want to put a logo or you want to change the text, that can be done from you. The next comes the radius authentication. So you can select radius profile. The reason I've been using default is because the default profile is used by the USG. If you have a third-party radius server, you can create a new profile and you can, set up the radius server IP address, and accordingly, all the authentication requests will be sent to that server instead of the USG. Right. Next comes access control. So this is basically the list of websites or IP addresses that will be allowed. The pre-authorization access is the list of IP addresses or host names that the clients who are not authorized, let's say that a client connects to the network, but he does not have a voucher. So you have the option to give them access to certain websites. So anything that you add in the list, even the users who are not authenticated would be able to access. The next comes post-authorization restrictions. This is a list which you can add for adding any restrictions once the user has been authorized.
Yeah, so the guest portal ends up being very, very, very helpful for clients that have a lot of guests visiting them. So, for example, companies, hotels, restaurants, etc., where they don't want to give guests access to their own network and want to create a separate guest portal. The UniFi controller makes it very easy to set up your own guest portal, customize your guest portal completely. You can also connect it to external portals where you can then enable OTP and other various authentication opportunities. So also, hotspot is a great way for people to kind of monetize on their Wi-Fi. So you can create a hotspot and then charge customers. You can have introduce billing in the hotspot, so customers pay for say 1 hour or 24 hours of Wi-Fi, and you give them a unique hotspot coupon that they use to log in. So both hotspot and guest portals are great ways to make your Wi-Fi network accessible to guests, while at the same time maintaining your security and making sure that your original network is not really affected.
Right. Let's move on to profiles. Okay, so this is where you create the radius profile, the default being the USG. If you go to edit in the USG profile, you have an option to enable it for wireless or wired networks as well. So our devices have the ability to set up radius assigned VLAN. So when you create a user, you have an option of specifying what VLAN that user should go to. So anyone who's connecting to an SSID that has been set up for radius authentication, that user will automatically be placed in that particular VLAN. So that is something I'll be talking about when we go into the next option, that is services. Can you go to switch ports? Okay, so this is where you create switch profiles. Can you add new profile? Okay, so once you're here, you have the option of selecting what is the management VLAN that you want for that particular profile. You also have the option of enabling PoE. The pass-through mode will only be applicable for devices that support pass-through, like the UniFi switch or the in-wall APs that have PoE pass-through. The next comes the tag networks. These are networks that will be tagged on that particular port of the switch where the profile is applied. The voice network is something that can be used for automatic VLAN assignments for VoIP phones. So any VoIP phone that supports LLD and you have selected a voice VLAN, those devices will be automatically placed into the voice VLAN. So the advanced option here, once again, they are for radius assigned VLAN or 802.1x. You have the option of auto, wherein the switch will select the authentication method automatically. Forced authorized is if you want the client to be authorized without going through the whole authentication process. Forced unauthorized is when the port will be set to unauthorized. That means it won't pass any traffic unless the device authenticates. MAC based is similar to wireless, the same thing that I explained. If you want a device to connect based on its MAC address, you can select MAC based VLAN. Multi-host is good for devices wherein you have multiple devices that want to do an authentication. In normal mode, it's only one devices that authenticates, but if you're selecting multi-host, there can be multiple devices that can authenticate using the same port. Next comes the link speed. You can set the link speed whatever you want, like 100 Mbps or 1 Gbps, depending upon whatever the devices support. Now you might see there are different speeds, but those are only applicable for devices that are managed. So if you do not have a switch that supports 50 Gbps, you won't be able to select that, or it won't work on the particular device that you're using. Port isolation is basically like private VLANs. We have a KB on that. You can go through it. It's something that helps to reduce broadcast and multicast traffic between two ports. Storm control, once again, it will